Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Sorry about that technical difficulty a little bit. You never know. All of these are supposed to plug and play, right? Just like CloudFoundry does, but it doesn't quite work that way. In any case, it's a pleasure to be speaking at Scala Days North America. My name is Raghavan Srinivas. I go by Rags. You see my Twitter address here, right? Hopefully, I won't take the entire 40 minutes. I'm going to do quite a few demos, show that it actually works. The first time I kind of moved my Scala application from run Pivotal IO and put it on IBM Bluemix. Really did very few changes, except had to change the application.conf, right? And pretty much everything worked. So that's kind of why I really got excited by CloudFoundry, and that's why I'm kind of doing this talk, okay? So before I get started, how many of you already use CloudFoundry or Heroku? Okay, a few people, got to watch out for you guys. But other than that, things have changed quite a bit. If you have used CloudFoundry before, okay, like probably 2-3 years back, it's improved significantly. You need to give it a shot if you haven't done it lately. So my name again, I work for EMC. My name is Rags, and go by Rags, just easy, because I don't know why people have a tough time pronouncing my name, Raghavan Srinivas, pretty straightforward. But Rags seems to be easier. I am a middleware and application programmer, done quite a bit of Java. I'm still kind of learning my way around Scala, right? But it runs on the JVM, so I'm pretty cool with that. I am an architect. I'm also an evangelist. I also do some part-time teaching and part-time writing for InfoQ whenever I have a chance. And this is my philosophy, which is basically, it's better to have an unanswered question than an unquestioned answer. Not quite sure what it means, okay, but essentially, if you have more questions towards the end of the talk, okay, I think I've done my job, okay? And remember, today is St. Patrick's Day, okay? So press the green button when you walk out. All right. So the agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to take a look at overview and architecture, okay? Going to look at applications and services, and then we'll look at evolving data schemas. I really like the evolutions. How many of you use evolutions in Scala? Is it still current? or is it outdated? There's something else. Scala land is changing so quickly. But we'll take a look at evolving the data schemas. And for those of you who haven't seen this, we'll take a look at that. Then, like I said, I'll do a bunch of demos and then follow up with resources and summary. Is that reasonable enough? Okay. A little bit of kind of a architecture or marketing kind of slides is, but it's pretty relevant in the sense that distributed computing kind of changes or morphs every decade or so, right? Initially you had the mainframe, then you had the client server, then the cloud. Your business dollars pretty much stay the same. If you're a CIO or a CTO, you realize this, but expectation seems to be growing exponentially. And I was at the OpenStack summit in Paris last year, and there was a keynote talk which, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. And basically what it said was, if you continue to do the things the way you did, you're gonna continue to get the results that you already got. Okay, so in other words, I think application life cycle has to change a little bit, right? And I think CloudFoundry and platform as a service, is gonna help kind of deliver your application to millions of billions of users, being able to connect to different services and so on, and we'll see what this means in a little bit. So, going back to, again, how things were done back in the dark old days, right? You had to do everything yourself, and we still do this a lot of times, right? But things have gotten a little bit better in the sense that, we use a Amazon or a Rackspace infrastructure, and really not have to worry about, at least provisioning the servers and so on, right? With infrastructure as a service, you have to worry about, everything above the infrastructure, right? Platform as a service kind of takes it one step better, and really what you got to focus is on your business logic, on your application, your data, the services that kind of integrate with the application and so on. So that's the premise, that's the promise of platform as a service in general, and CloudFoundry in particular, okay? So if you can think of like OpenStack or AWS or vSphere as kind of the infrastructure as a service, you build your applications on top of that, right? I've been doing a lot of projects, which is why I've gotten a lot of gray hair, right? And you realize that, there is a lot more to building your application than writing the application itself, right? And if I can avoid, kind of doing all this, I probably would have gotten off with, lesser gray hair. Okay, so that's the idea behind this. Then there is this new term called microservices. Depending on whichever way you look at it, right? Old wine in new bottles. Is it service-oriented architecture 2.0 or whatever, right? Or 3.0? It still has some meaning, and I think the primary meaning here is that you are moving away from traditional monolithic applications, where your application was served by a single data service. Whether it was like a MySQL, a Postgres, or Mongo, or whatever, right? You typically have multiple services. It's just about polyglot everything, right? You might write your service in Scala. You might connect it to a service in Java. Java service is using MySQL. Your Scala service might be using MongoDB, or vice versa, and so on. So the idea is that you definitely integrate a number of different services, and to be able to do that as easily as possible, is the power of platform as a service in general. Okay, so again, kind of repeating the same thing. I have to do a whole bunch of stuff like provision the VM, install the application runtime, deploy the application, configure the. How many of you have gone through all of these steps? Pretty much all of us do this, right? So instead of doing all this, is there an easier way? Just push my application, scale my application, bind my application to a service, and I'm ready to go. That's again the power of CloudFoundry. Okay, so a lot of enterprise capabilities are taken care of by the platform as a service. Like for example, application containerization. You cannot go wrong today if you mention the term Docker, right? But who knows, right? This may not be the container in vogue in a few years, or maybe even in a few months. CloudFoundry does, again, do containers. It's based on LXC, which is the Linux containers. Again, nothing new, but the point is that, rather than you worry about the containers, let the platform take care of this. I kind of go back to my Java EE days, right? Where a lot of these abstractions were provided for you at a higher level, so you don't have to worry about integrating to a number of these different services. Scaling, network isolation, routing to a service, all of these are provided to you. And the nice part is that it doesn't matter what infrastructure you're running on, right? Whether you're running it on VMware, vSphere, or whatever, OpenStack, or if you're running it on Amazon Web Services, okay? These are kind of the primary infrastructure as a service where CloudFoundry is typically run on, all right? So if you look at application development lifecycle again, you kind of, this is kind of how your application lifecycle looks like, right? At the very outset. But there is really a whole bunch of things that you have to do. Like for example, how do you when you push your first release, how do you dynamically route, right? How do you do continuous integration and continuous distribution? And how do you maintain your application? For example, how do you do log aggregation, right? Just because your application uses the var syslog format doesn't mean that you can do log aggregation easily, right? CloudFoundry actually provides a way in which you can do that, fairly straightforward. How do you do blue-green deployments, for example, right? If you want to, switch from one application to another, or from one version to another, can you do that easily? And again, the idea behind platform as a service or CloudFoundry is, let's do it in a way that, you as a developer or you as an operator, don't have to worry too much about this. There are ways in which you can do that. And I think the nicest part about this is that, it's a foundation. The foundation actually came into being formally in December 2014, so it's pretty brand new. Although the early, there were early versions of that, in the early part of last year. It was formally born in December, and there are a whole bunch of different companies. So if you don't like, run Pivotal IO, you can go to IBM Bluemix. If you don't like IBM Bluemix, you can go to Helion. If you don't like Helion, you can go to ActiveState, and so on, okay? And that's, I think, the nice part of that. And what I'll do in this demo is kind of show how I can push my app, both to a, run Pivotal IO and to a IBM Bluemix, okay? I have versions running on my laptop. I have a version of CloudFoundry running on OpenStack, which is running on the Mirantis OpenStack Express, but I'm not going to show that because, I just don't have the time. If you're interested, we can always talk later. Okay, and that's, I think, the nice part. Again, going back to my Java EE days, really there were a lot of enterprise companies that provided support for Java EE, right? So same thing here as well. The architecture is pretty straightforward. Okay, there are a bunch of VMs, and they're pretty self-explanatory. Okay, you think of the elastic runtime, which is really the core of CloudFoundry, if you will, right? Everything else is kind of like, if you look at the services, right, they're not technically part of the CloudFoundry, okay? So they are really kind of, they may be either sitting alongside CloudFoundry or they may be sitting outside of CloudFoundry. You can really integrate to a service that is running in, in some other virtual machine. It's running in some other data center. It really doesn't matter, okay? As you can see, we'll see some of these different virtual machines and what their roles are. But the one that you would probably want to start off with is the DEA pool, which stands for the Droplet Execution Agent. And that is where your application essentially runs. Okay, so it's in a container, and essentially those container, runs your application. So, it essentially compiles it into a form that it can run. And that compilation form is referred to as a droplet, okay? So Droplet Execution Agent, a lot of these terms, you'll see, especially if you've used Heroku before, might sound similar, and it's not by accident, it is, okay? You have the load balancer, you have the router, cloud controller, health manager, UAA stands for authentication and authorization, okay, and we'll take a look at that. Then you have the login server. There is some more VMs for metrics collections, for log aggregator and all that. This has changed a little bit, okay, and in fact, even the container has changed. Used to be something called as Warden, but now, you can use Docker as well with this, okay? So there are some subtle changes, but in principle, this is kind of how it looks, okay? And again, the idea is that, there is a well-defined interface called the CPI, or the Cloud Provider Interface, which isolates what infrastructure you're running it on top of, okay? So all that you're going to do, remember, is just do the push, the scale, and the bind the service, and you're ready to go, okay? Make sense? So what we saw before was, maybe called the inner shell, okay, and this is the outer shell, which essentially what it does is, it kind of makes sure that your VMs are available. So if some of these VMs fail, Bosh, what it does is, it essentially recreates those VMs. Okay, there is a known state, it compares it with the known state, and essentially if it's not in that, in that desired state, then it's going to recreate that VM. Okay, so essentially it does the health check and all that, and this is referred to as the outer shell. Okay, so again, technically not part of CloudFoundry, but Bosh, you can think of it like, how many of you use Chef, Puppet, and so on? Very, very similar. Chef Puppet is great for, configuration, but, once you've done the configuration, that's it, you're done, right? What Bosh does is, it continues to live beyond, the installation, so you can do upgrades, you can monitor the health, and so on and so forth, okay? So you essentially have a deployment, you compile the packages, and create and bind the VMs, and it creates a bunch of VMs, which we saw in the shell before, okay? So you have the DEA, you have the cloud controller, and so on and so forth. That makes sense? And essentially, like I said, what it does is it has a health monitor, which monitors the health of the VMs. And if a particular VM is down, it's notified, and it's going to automatically create that VM. So moving on from the VMs, because we are more on the application side, right? So moving on to applications and services. How does an application work? Essentially you have, again, a bunch of different components. Router, as is very evident, provides a route to that particular application, right? The cloud controller manages the application lifecycle. The DEA is where the application actually resides and runs, right? So if you want to scale, you're going to use the DEA and so on. And then you have some blob stores and databases and so on and so forth, okay? And this is really part of the Elastic runtime. Okay, so there's some cheesy graphics here, okay, just bear with me. But essentially what it does is, as you can imagine, you really don't have to do anything. You just push your application, the build packs are going to be queried, and is it pertinent to this build pack? If it's not, it's going to move down serially. Okay, if you just do a CF build packs, you can see what are all the build packs that are in there, right? And then essentially there will be one build pack which will say, okay, I'm ready to, kind of run this application, right? So if you're for example, pushing a jar file or a zip file or whatever, it's going to explode it. It's going to figure out what I need to do with that particular package and do the appropriate things. And you'll see that in action in a little bit, okay? And essentially what it's going to do is it's going to compile that particular application into what is referred to as a droplet, right? So the droplet is the, kind of the execution agent, and that droplet is stored in the blob store, so that next time if you want to, run the same application, you really don't have to do, go through the compilation phase. It has, or it knows, where the, droplet is, it fetches it and runs it, okay? Of course, you can always push it if you want to. So if you push the application, there's some application, some metadata and all that, right? You can connect to a service via service broker nodes, okay? And then essentially what's going to happen is, your droplet is compiled and stored in a blob store, and the droplet is executed in that particular DEA, okay? So these are the things that, again, it's not technically necessary that you know that, but I always try to, kind of have a look under the hood, so that you have an idea of what's going on. If something goes wrong, then you can at least kind of figure out where things might be wrong, okay? So binding to a service is pretty straightforward. There are ways in which you can do that. You can provide a URL yourself, right? You can provide a username, password, ... all of that. In which case you can, it's called as a user-provided service, okay, or CUPS, okay? And you can do a CUPS, customer user-provided service, or you can create a service via what is referred to as a service broker. What the service broker does is, essentially it connects to a data service. Like I said, this may be residing within CloudFoundry, outside CloudFoundry, or completely outside the data center, right? There are multiple ways of doing this, okay? And all that it does is, it obtains the connection data, right? And caches the credentials for you, okay? So you don't have to provide these credentials, you don't have to provide this URL every time you connect to this particular data source, okay? And these credentials actually, if you look at the environment variables, it's available through the environment variables, you can use the environment variables, and really without having to change your program, you can connect to the same service, in another CloudFoundry instance, and really nothing changes at all, okay? And we'll see, we'll see an example of that as well. So these are referred to as managed services, okay, which essentially caches the, the credentials, and it's possible through the service broker interface, okay, which essentially has service broker, and there are a bunch of service nodes, and like I said, these credentials are exposed through the environment variables. That makes sense? Okay. So one of the nice things about Scala, getting to Scala, because really, like so far, I've kept it very generic. You can really download any application that you want, including Java applications, PHP, you name it, right? There are build packs for pretty much everything. Heroku did a great job in the sense that build packs are on open source, so you can just take the Heroku build pack and use it in CloudFoundry, just like that, okay? It's pretty much the same. But one of the nice things about, at least I like this, is the evolution part. For those of you who do DevOps, you know that infrastructure is also expressed in the form of code, right? So this is also taking this one step further. You express your data also in terms of code, okay, if that makes any sense. So in other words, if I'm cutting over from one version to another version, and your schema is also changed, what you're going to do is, there may be a little bit of time when the system may not be available, but what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you've changed your schema to the newer version, and you're ready to go, okay? And how do you do it? Pretty straightforward. You essentially have what are referred to as up script and down scripts, right? The up scripts is going to do whatever it's required, to roll over to the newer version, okay? And downs are kind of roll back, if you will. So that's kind of exactly what it does. If that makes sense, right? And we'll see an example of this. It's very straightforward. All that you do is you write this in plain old SQL, okay? For those of you who are familiar with this, unfortunately, it's only available for SQL. I'm not quite sure if it's available for, other databases, okay? And essentially, it's in conf/evolution/default, and they're expressed as 1.sql, 2.sql, ... okay? So you can run as many evolution scripts as you want as well, okay? So with that, let me move on to the demos. I think I'm doing reasonably well on time. My knowledge is that it's only in Scala. It may have been inherited from other languages. So the question was, is evolution scripts only relevant to Scala, or can I do it in other languages? I wish I could do it in other languages as well, but I'm not quite sure if you can do that, okay? Perhaps somebody else can answer if there is, an equivalent in Java or Flyweight DB? Okay, yeah. So I think it's a great idea. Okay, I mean it seems pretty straightforward, very simple to use, but I think it's pretty powerful in my opinion. So let's move on to to some demos, and then we can break after that. Okay, so the proof is in the pudding. Okay, good. At least you can see it now. All right, so let's start with a very simple example. Can you guys see this? Okay. So this is the only one where I'm gonna, so very straightforward. All that I do is activate a disk. Can everybody see that, or do you want me to increase the font? Yeah, I'll try that. Is it better? Not really? Okay. So all that I did here was, I create a distribution package, okay? And all that I'm going to do is, let me see where I'm logged in. Okay, so I'm on Pivotal IO, okay, as you can see here, okay? So all that I do is log into provide my credentials, okay? So my demos are all CLI based because, CLI is the new sexy, right? But I think the nice part is, I really don't have to worry about, keep it to the least common denominator, essentially, okay? So basically you can target an organization and there is a space, which provides you kind of isolation, if you will, okay? So I say development, okay? And you can see here, I have already some apps running, okay? So let's not worry about those apps, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna push my app, and I'm pushing it to run Pivotal IO, okay? So for those of you who may not be able to see, I just say CF push, I provide the application name, right? And I provide what kind of memory I want, I could just increase it to 1 gig, okay, because I can, right? And I just, specify the path, okay? So target universal star.zip because that's the one I just built, okay? What is the what? Oh yeah, I can show you that, yeah. So basically that's the one that got built by Activator just now. So when I said Activator dist, what it's gonna do is it's gonna create the zip file which is the unit of deployment, if you will, okay? So this is what you would go and drop it in your container, right? And that's exactly what is happening here, okay? So essentially this is you can see here, hello play 2.3 Scala, whatever, snapshot.zip. That's the one that's getting deployed, okay? So it's gonna, remember the process, right? The build packs are gonna look at it, and one of them is gonna say, okay, I'm ready to, deploy this, right? So it's gonna take the zip file, explode it, create a droplet for that, and uploading the droplet, okay? So now it's uploading the droplet, okay? And notice here, there are a bunch of build packs there, right? So it kind of takes care of all the dependencies for me. And if you do a CF logs on this, you can see that, it does the port forwarding and all the right things, that you expect, right? And now my application is ready to go, okay? So all that I need to do is go to this URL. Okay, can you see the URL there? I can specify the URL also if I want to. Okay, let me go back here. Okay, and I just put that in, and hopefully it should work just fine. Okay, so this is the the very simple application, right? So what I'm going to do now is kind of go into my Bluemix. Okay, again, same thing, CF login. Actually, before I do that, okay, yeah, maybe I should do that. I'm sorry, I forgot one thing, which is, I wanted to show scaling. Let me do that. This is running on Pivotal IO right now, yeah. Okay, for some reason this is not coming up. This is the fun part of the live demos, right? I can't even blame it on the network because, it's 5 gigahertz and it's really, really, really nice. Okay. And again, same thing. Basically provide the password. I have authenticated, okay, and I pick the organization, okay, and I pick the space, okay, and you'll see that, okay, it's still running. So what I'm going to do here is CF scale, okay, minus I is equal to 4. What the heck, right? just because I can, I will let's do the hello play, even though it's a. So scaling this is as straightforward as this. So basically what it did now is created 4 instances. Okay, so if you do a CF apps now, you will see, in the instances, you should see 4 of them running as far as hello play is concerned. Okay, and interesting. Usually it's not this bad. Okay, so you see that? It's running 4 of 4. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so I showed you scaling. Okay, I'm just going to log out. Vertical scaling? Yeah, in a way, yes. Yeah, there are ways. Yes, definitely you can. Yeah, I mean this is not the only way. In the CLI, you can do auto scaling as well. Yes. So going back to the IBM. Actually, while I'm at it, okay, so let me show you this particular application as well. Okay, so this is already running, okay, on Run Pivotal IO, and it's the exact same application that I'm going to push to Bluemix. Okay, the only thing you can see here is, I've added one more 575. You'll see 574 there. Okay, you'll see that in a second, but I just wanted to show that to you. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into IBM Bluemix. Okay, and I'm going to log in. Same thing. Okay. Only problem is, I don't have as much, so I can't really do scaling and all that as I can on the Run Pivotal IO. Okay. All right. So again, CF apps. Okay, you can see, it's the exact same application. Okay. So if I go to, I can show you actually. I can show it being pushed. Okay. So if I do a CF apps, can you guys see that, or did I? Is that a little bit better? Okay. And all that I need to do is CF services. Okay, and you'll see here that Rags Computers, okay, is bound to a service called PMySQL. Okay, so essentially it's bound to a MySQL service. Make sense? Okay. And if I go here, you can see here again. Pardon me if you can't see this properly, but essentially all that I had to do was in my application conf, I had to say db.default.driver is the JDBC driver, and that's it. Right? And this is the beauty of this. Everything is queried from the environment, and it gets the right thing. And I pushed the same application to Run Pivotal IO and to IBM, no change whatsoever. All right? I was smart enough. What I did was I used the same name for the service. Of course, if the name of the service changes, then you have to tweak it a little bit and so on. Okay? So what was I going to do? I was, essentially I was going to show you. I'm going to restage this particular service. Okay, which is the same thing that I ran on Run Pivotal IO. Okay. So essentially, what I'm doing, if you're connecting your service, if you're connecting to a new service, you may have to restage. You don't have to push your application; you just have to restage the service. Okay. And essentially what it's doing again here is, it queries the environment variables for the services, connects to the service, does the droplet, same process. Whether you're running it on HP Helion, or whether you're running it on Bluemix, the Any9 service, any of those, it doesn't matter, right? So it's doing the right things, okay? Let's give it some time here, okay? Yes. Yeah, so the question was capabilities of the health manager, and essentially there are a number of different, you think of the health manager as being, as being there to provide high availability, okay? So there are a number of ways in which you can do high availability. One is at the VM level and the other is at the, the droplet process level, if you will, right? So we already saw at the Bosch, it kind of keeps track of the VMs. So likewise, the health monitor can do something similar as well. Again, what it does is it looks at the desired state, and if it's not in a desired state, it's going to bring it up again. Okay, it's really up to you as a programmer to kind of keep the data synchronized and all that. That's not something that the platform itself does out of the box anyway. That's up to you to kind of deal with it. Okay, so this is the same application. Okay, running. I pushed it. Think of it as I pushed it. Okay, I really didn't push it. I did push it before, okay, and you should see the same thing on Bluemix. Exact same application. All that I did was, if you look at my manifest, sorry, just give me a sec. Yeah. If you look at my manifest, which is in YAML, do you see that? The name, the memory, number of instances, what is the path, and what are the services I'm connecting to? Okay, and you can push this application, exactly same way on Run Pivotal IO and IBM. I kind of beaten that to death, right? It applies the evolution scripts, both, wherever you do it, and the application behaves exactly identically. There are a bunch of other Scala applications. I even have this WebSocket application. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. But basically, it's a very simple chat application that uses WebSockets. Okay, and this also works pretty well. Okay, so we should be done. If only I can type. Okay, so I sign in. It's a very simple application. Okay, and you get into a chat room. You can access this chatrag.mybluemix.net, okay? But if you access it, say something nice, all right? Or at least don't say something bad, all right? So essentially, there's a very simple chat application that, again, I deployed it to CloudFoundry. This is part of the samples. I don't, you can just play around with this. Again, scaling this or pushing it to different CloudFoundry instances, pretty straightforward. Okay, so let me go back and try to wrap up the presentation. Okay, we're done with the demos, resources and summary. Sign up for the CF and Bosch, CloudFoundry and Bosch mailing list. It's pretty heavy traffic, okay, but not completely overwhelming. Learn how to write 12-factor applications if you haven't. I think it's great. Free workshops and roadshows, there are a bunch of those. I don't know if any of you heard of the CloudFoundry After Dark. Okay, it's strongly recommended, because it's completely geeky conversation. Okay, it's really strongly recommended if you cannot go to sleep, because it's like, at 12 o'clock, at 9 o'clock Pacific. Okay, I happen to live in Boston, and sometimes at 12 o'clock I've caught this. Okay, so, again, if you can't go to sleep, go to the CloudFoundry After Dark. It's kind of a cool event. Register for the next CloudFoundry Summit. Okay, this is coming up in May, first week of May. Pretty good talks from last year. If you just do a CloudFoundry Summit, you can figure out whether it's for you or not. Okay, try out the Pivotal Web Services. Okay, run.pivotal.io. Okay, but if you don't like that, there are a bunch of other services as well. Okay, I think the idea is that all of these are going to provide the same capabilities, same underlying capabilities, but where the distinction is going to happen is in kind of providing the services. providing the SLA for the services, and so on. Okay, so if you noticed, the connection that I was making to the service was actually a ClearDB service. The ClearDB service is actually offered as a third-party service, both for IBM Bluemix and for Run Pivotal IO. Okay, but the very minimal plan, which is I think called the Spark plan or whatever, right, doesn't allow you to do a whole lot of stuff. So that's where the distinction is going to happen. What level of services, how do you distinguish between them, and so on. Okay, these are some of the ones that you can give it a shot. Most of these allow you for at least a month of trial. Okay, if you don't want to do this, you can install it on your laptop. There is a Bosch Lite version, pretty straightforward to install, except that you've got to have at least 16 gigabytes, okay, on your laptop. Okay, you can try that out, and again, works exactly the same way. Okay, with that said, thank you very much. I have time for a few questions, and remember Patrick's Day. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the continuous delivery or deployment and what that automation looks like with CloudFoundry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think CloudFoundry platform was intended, it's not like, continuous integration and continuous delivery was first and foremost, when CloudFoundry was designed, because CloudFoundry goes back to more than like 3 years back, okay, when the term was not even there. But the point is that, I think both developers and operators can use this platform. It provides a number of services for operators, like for example, log aggregation, for example, Jenkins integration, a whole bunch of services you can even integrate with, for example, LDAP server and so on. So those are all strong points from a operator perspective, right? So likewise, from a developer perspective, pushing the app, scaling the app, and all that, right, is pretty straightforward. Operator perspective, again, if a VM goes down, CloudFoundry may not be available for a certain amount of time, but it automatically recreates, so it makes it a little bit easier. From a developer perspective, again, you don't have to wait for an operator to, so there is a lot of, synergy between the two, if you will, right? And really the platform creates one kind of platform for DevOps, if you will, okay? So I've heard this over and over again that, a lot of people use CloudFoundry, because it makes it more amenable to microservices, DevOps, and some of the newer paradigms, if you will, okay?